It is 6:30, so this is the appointed date and time for our public hearing on the audit, our annual report, and I will turn it over to Mary Beth Rogers, our Executive Director of Business Services.
Okay. Hi. Hello. Mark's going to kind of go over the audit for you guys. Mark Sawyer was the lead on our audit this school year. So this is the first time I think you guys have met Mark. He's been working on our audit for the whole time I've been here. This is 7 years now, but this is the first year that he was the lead on it. So he will present. He's got some slides here. He can go over some of the pages in the audit if you need to. You physically have the audit. And then if you have any questions, specific questions about anything you saw in the audit, you can ask him. So if you want to get started, Mark.
All right, hello, everybody. I don't know that I necessarily need this. Can everybody hear me okay? I like to think I project pretty well here, so. This is my clicker here. Okay. Well, I guess before I get started, a thank you to Mary Beth, and I'm sure there's a team behind the scenes that assists her. We know an audit is no easy task. You're a large district, a lot going on, a lot of questions, a lot of requests, a lot of follow-up, a lot of communication that needs to happen, not only during the audit, but really throughout the year as topics come up. So we've always appreciated working with the district and find you to be top-notch audit clients and your responsiveness and how much you care, the passion for good financial reporting and good accounting. So that makes our life a little easier. On top of that, you know, COVID obviously was a challenge for business offices in the state. A lot of one-time federal funding, lots of requirements, lots of different guidance flying around out there over the past few years. So a lot to manage. Luckily, things are starting to die down a little bit on that end. I think we felt the effect of that this year, that things were a little smoother from an audit perspective when it comes to those federal grants. That should continue here fiscal year 24, and then hopefully we can put it in the rear view mirror for us. With that, I'll get started. I like to, especially when I have a meeting like this, I like to go through in somewhat detail. And you know, if you have questions, feel free to stop me at any time, interrupt me. I'm going to take you through the report. To some degree, we have recapped on these slides here. But you know, the hope is that this flows with the financials. So if you have the reports, you can look through them later if they're up at your seats there. But this is meant to mirror the financials and some of the high, you know, bird's eye view of the audit, large changes, fluctuations, that sort of thing. Obviously, the report card on the audit, the opinion letter, and all that. So it's not just a click. Oh. All right, so I already hit on some of this. I mean, the audit was really pretty seamless in the preparation and coming out on site. We had no issues getting through our work. Always have felt the team's easy to work with, and right now feels like Mary Beth's mainly the team, but I know there's people supporting her behind the scenes and really helping with a lot of the documentation pulling and all that sort of stuff. I mentioned the Education Stabilization Fund, those ESSER funds. I believe 24 or so subcomponents of ESSER, so again, a lot to that fund at a federal level, which has many sub-programs that are part of it. As if you didn't have enough going on, GASB pronouncements, those are always happening. So this year, GASB 96 and GASB 101 were implemented by the district. The first of those, that acronym there, SBITAs, software-based IT arrangements, basically similar to your lease pronouncement from last year in the accounting for it. So we had to implement that this year, so some procedures came into play for that and determining materiality and these sorts of things. Not a lot to report in the actual face of the financials in the long-term debt schedules due to materiality considerations, more small agreements that didn't rise to that level. Compensated absences is really the unknown one. Not a lot of chatter in the last year has been out there for the compensated absence, GASB 101. What that did, we loved it because it allowed for some simplification of reporting as it relates to accrued sick and vacation leaves and anything else that you have, early retirement incentives, these sorts of things, employee based. compensated absences. We're now able to show a net change, so that's really the only impact in your report. We now show a net change in those balances rather than amounts being earned and amounts being used in each year, which can be messy. That's why auditors are liking that. Construction, since my time working with the district, so I started with the firm 7 years ago, I think there's been ongoing construction almost the whole time. This year it eased up a little bit from the construction in progress, but as you see there, and as you all know, you have a new bond, 66.33 million. You don't see a lot of that yet in the capital asset note, the construction in progress balances, but I would imagine right now, this point in the year, and as you go through the entire year, there's going to be a lot of expenditures in that new fund. That was a mouthful just to get to the probably most important part here. Unmodified opinion, that's the highest opinion we can give in an audit. That's what you'll see in your auditor report letter that's in the front of the financials. You want us copying and pasting that letter, meaning we didn't have issues, we didn't have audit findings to report and include in the opinion letter, and no emphasis of matter types of situations. So you have the highest opinion we can give. That's all the state accepts, so it's good to get that. No issues with state aid or anything along those lines. I mentioned GASB 96 already. It didn't impact the report, and I already talked about GASB 101 there. I like to just give a little context. So anyone that hasn't sat through one of these presentations, or maybe we didn't hit on this in past years, page 6 of the report and note A to the financial statements does a good job talking about what governmental financial statements are really all about. And there's 2 sets of financials. You have your district-wide financials. You'll find those on 14 and 15. Those include some of the long-term focused types of resources, such as your pension and OPEB liability. Those are removed for the governmental fund financial statements. So this is where you can analyze on a fund-by-fund basis your general fund, your capital project funds, all those non-major special revenue funds, debt funds. You can look at those fund-by-fund through the governmental fund statements, which are reported on the modified accrual basis of accounting. You might have heard that before. So we really have 2 sets of financials. Page 17 and 19 are good pages showing what has been removed to get from one schedule to the next. So the statement of net position, you'll find this condensed version in the MD&A, which is what I like to point our boards to more often than not. We have kind of high-level financial information, some statistical types of analysis of that. But again, it's on district-wide financial statement perspective, so you do have your net pension and OPEB. So I think this slide here really demonstrates just how much those impact your district-wide financials, and you can see how it can really cloud the picture of what's going on. You have a $134.6 million deficit. Obviously that sounds huge, but you're in good company with pretty much the rest of the state, driven by that net pension and OPEB liability. You're probably keyed in on really massive increases from last year. Those were expected, and we're not the experts when it comes to the calculations of these amounts. What we're really doing is compiling information. Office of Retirement Services publishes data tables. State of Michigan audits those data tables. We compile in your report. Note G and H present anything that you'd like to know about what goes into that from an actuarial perspective. I like there's much more to it than this, but I like to connect these large changes the last couple of years really in the plan measurement date for the investments. I won't take you all the way back, but September 30 is the measurement date. So 2020, things were pretty ugly in September. 2020, from an investment standpoint. 21, things looked a lot better. So that 2022 column was based on the September 30, 2021 measurement date. So there were really large decreases last year in those liabilities. If you look back at your prior year report, you'll see probably, and I didn't look back at 21, but it would be more comparable to what you're seeing this year because 2022, again, the market was in really rough condition. So that impacted your liability. So a little more information on some of the changes. I think I've talked about this as I've gone through, just some statistical changes that you'll note in there. Statement of activities. Again, this is district-wide financials, so it's impacted by GASB 34 and capitalizing assets, changes in pension and OPEB expenses as well impact this. Not a whole lot to comment on here. You did have your one-time MIPSERS deposit, but that was upwards of $6 million, so that's impacting your operating grants line. You have federal revenues are up in the past year. I believe those were up a few $1 million, also contributing to that operating grants line. Restricted state aid also falls in there. Instruction, supporting services, outside of costs increasing in general, that the one-time deposits in there as well, and those are also impacted by some of the GASB 34 activity. Again, just some quick information on here, not a whole lot more to key in on here. I think I hit on all that. So I talked about the governmental fund financial statements, page 16, 18. Those are good for the fund by fund analysis. You can see 8.3 million or so was the increase in fund balance in the general fund, your primary operating fund. Did a little digging on what exactly is leading to that, and again, it's much more than this, but you had a $19 million increase in state and federal source revenue, only a $12 million increase in instruction and supporting services. So that's a big contributor to that large increase in fund balance. Worth noting, you're still within what's considered a healthy fund balance range, which MDE likes to see 10 to 20%. We compare your ending general fund balance to your approved original budget for the upcoming year, so your 24 original budget, and that's where the percentage comes in. I have it on a slide coming up here, but it's just under 20%. And I already talked about the non-majors. I won't go through them today. They're in the back of the report, consolidated all in one column on the governmental funds financials on page 16 and 18. So the budget to actual report, as a board, you're heavily involved in budgeting, so this is a pretty important page of the report, so we've brought this in. Excuse me. We like to see, not large negative variances, under projected revenue or over projected expenditures. We evaluate expenditures on the functional level, so the combined totals of instruction, supporting services, community services. You're in the positive with all of those, so overall no real budget concerns here, but it can show you sort of function by function how you did from a budgeting perspective. And we already talked about the $8 million increase, of which most of your balance in the general fund is unrestricted. You have just under $2 million in assigned fund balance. We just highlight a couple of the more critical notes. There's a lot of information in the notes to the financials. I won't go through them, but with the new bond issuance, your investments are up. You can find information in Note B about cash equivalents and investments. Property tax, the Note C talks about state aid and how that works and property taxes in your district. Note E and Note F are two really good ones, I think. You had some bond activity this year that reflected in Note F, and Note E shows the capital asset activity, which with how much construction has occurred in the last really decade, you have a lot of activity in your capital asset note. And I already mentioned notes G and H, more than you'll ever want to know on those pension and OPEB plans. Can't tell from this, but this is the transition to the single audit report. Does anybody have questions on the financial statements before I move on to the single audit? All right. So those, for anyone that doesn't know, that's not familiar with a single audit, when you have $750 in federal expenditures, collectively for all grants, you're required to get what's called a single audit. It accompanies the financial statement audit. We issue an in relation to opinion, meaning the amounts and balances we're presenting in the CFA are a direct relationship to what we're showing in the financial audit. So in that report, one of the notes to the report shows a reconciliation between federal revenue recognized in your audit versus the expenditures, the federal expenditures in the CFA. So you can connect the dots on those. As you can see, there's two letters, both unmodified opinions. Again, we're copying and pasting those letters, which is what you want to see. The first one is because of the first piece I was explaining, the relationship to the financial audit. We're dependent on those controls over financial reporting, so we do walkthroughs of internal controls over some of your key financial processes, and those are relied on to some degree in this report. So had we had issues with that, you would have a modified opinion there, but you don't. And like the the bullet there says, this is a risk-based audit. We do not look at every grant program that you have. And just for context, you had 11.6 million or so this year in federal expenditures. We happened to audit 2 programs this year, Special Education Cluster and Education Stabilization Fund, which are 2 of your larger programs. So I think we did, look at close to 70% of those total expenditures. A lot of that was by chance. We're required to audit your large programs every 3rd year. So this year, the Special Education Cluster needed to be looked at. And because the Education Stabilization Fund is a high-risk program, we have to look at that basically every year. Again, unmodified opinion, the second of the 2 would be our report on compliance. So we perform compliance testing, control testing for those major programs, the 2 that I mentioned, and we had no issues this year. So this slide's pretty good in showing you what I just talked about. The type A programs, those are your 3 that are individually over 750, meaning that 3-year rotation I talked about comes into play for all of those. So you might expect nutrition coming up soon. We didn't audit that this year. Sometimes we might get into the smaller programs, but that's risk driven, and really the focus of these audits are more on the larger programs. So you can see this year we audited 2, 78%, so even more than I said before. No findings, and you're a low risk auditee, meaning you have a history of no findings, which is great. I think I've said it enough with no issues working with management on this end either. No large adjusting journal entries, and this is actually referring to there's a letter that we're required to send to the board where we would communicate these things. If we had difficulties with management, if we were adjusting your books with large material entries, we would put those in there, and you won't see those. You will see an excess fund balance in food service, a disclosure on that. That comes from the 3rd bullet there says a request from MDE to put those in the report. It's not a federal requirement, so historically we were not including those in the single audit, but we are putting them in the letter just to really for the state's tracking of that. So I'm sure you're working through the spend down of your food service fund balance. Then on the horizon, these are just sort of things to think about, the monitoring of the food service fund balance. You're close to the end of all your ESF funding. I think there's a little of the 11T equalization going into this year, at least there was. Some monitoring of that, some of the final expenditure reports for this federal funding as it all is closing out. The bonded construction fund audit is something I like to mention a lot. That Treasury Bulletin 7 gives good information on sinking fund requirements, as well as when you have a new bond, an audit that's required to be completed either throughout the duration of it or at the end of it, which has typically been our firm's approach to at the close of your projects. When those projects are substantially complete, we'll work on this audit with your business office. That was a lot. Anybody have any questions? Yes. Okay. Sure. Yeah, I mean, some of them were on these slides, and I think page 6 is a good one, and note A, where it talks about what is the modified accrual basis of accounting versus the full accrual. Why do we have 2 sets of financials? Because I think it's a little confusing for anyone kind of paging through it for the first time. Some of those notes that I talked about, note B, note the capital asset note, the long-term debt note, and really an understanding of the general fund budget to actual statement, I think would be key for a board member as well. Beyond that, I'm happy to help you gather some resources or pinpoint some other parts of the report if that doesn't help. Yes? Yeah, budget to actual. Page 20 is the budget to actual. Yep. Yeah, especially for a board, it's a lot of efforts are made in budgeting. So.
If they want to know a little bit more about the other revenue ones, all the other non-majors, then you're looking at page 68 and 69. You want to see how food service, early childhood, and then even beyond
That was going to be what I said, yeah. Did you have a question too? Current assets, you're looking at the MD&A. I think the biggest reason is the increase due to the bond issuance, 66 million in the investment balance. Sorry, those flow into that line item. Yeah, so it's also reflected in the long-term liabilities. You'll see a similar large increase down below, 154 million to 219. That's also the bond issuance. So that's the easiest piece to point to. Anything else? Thank you.
Any other comments? Hearing none, we close the public hearing. Thank you very much. Order the regular meeting of the Clarkston Community Schools Board of Education. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mrs. McLean, can you please call the roll?
Yes. Mrs. Love.
Here.
Mrs. Egan. Here. Mrs. Sivers.
Here.
Mrs. Crane.
Here.
Mr. Heyer. Here. Mrs. McGinnis. Mr. Need.
Here. We have a quorum. We will proceed. Mrs. McGinnis apologizes. She had a family emergency that came up just now, and she will be unable to join us tonight. This meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business. It is not to be considered a community public hearing. There is a place for public comment and public participation as indicated in agenda items 3 and 9. Item 2 is the approval of the consent agenda. May I have a motion, please? Don't all jump at once.
I know, I'm looking for this page. Sorry.
I move that the Board of Education approves the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
Motion's been made and supported. The consent agenda, there's an item that requires a roll call. So, Mrs. McLean, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Egan.
Yes.
Mrs. Crane.
Yes.
Mr. Heyer.
Yes.
Mrs. Love.
Yes.
Mrs. McGinnis. Mrs. Sivers.
Yes.
Mr. Need.
Yes. Motion carried. Thank you. Item 3 is citizens' request to address the board. You are given 2 opportunities to address the board. Under this item, item 3.1, you can request to address the board on any topic that is on tonight's agenda. And under item 9, you are welcome to address the board on any topic. While making comments, please state your name and address. Direct your comments to the board president. Each person may speak for up to 2 minutes, and per established procedures, the board will not respond to questions or interact with the speaker during public comment, although there may be follow-up after the meeting through our superintendent and administration. Mrs. Allen, could you? Okay. So we have no one to address the board on agenda topics, and again, you will have an opportunity under item 9 to address the board on any topic. Item 4 is our superintendent update. Dr. Ryan.
Thank you, President Need. Good evening, community. Have a couple great announcements regards to the kind of finale of our fall sports season and marching band. Currently, our varsity volleyball, who's in the OAA Red, which is the top part of the district in Oakland County, is both the district and regional champs, and they're playing in the quarterfinals of the state tomorrow night. So we want to cheer on our Lady Wolves. Our varsity football team, unfortunately, fell in the regionals this past Friday by 1 point in a very close match. Our swim and dive team competed in the regionals, and we have a diver that's qualified for the states, and our varsity girls golf finished 5th in the region, and has 2 golfers qualifying for state competition. And our boys varsity soccer, they lost in the district finals, unfortunately, but we need to give not only congrats to a great season, but I want to give a specific salute out to Seaby Roy, who is named Michigan's Mr. Soccer, which is a big honor and great for Clarkston Schools. And this is the first time that we've had a Clarkston high school athlete named that. And it's also note that his father, been told, was also named Mr. Soccer, but he was at Livonia back in the early 1990s. So I guess it runs in the family. As far as our boys and girls cross-country teams, boys finished 8th in the entire state, and girls finished 25th in the state. So really, by all our teams across the various sports, had a lot of success this season. And our CHS marching band put into competition at Ford Field last weekend and placed 7th in their flight in the state competition. So congratulations to them. Finally, 2 other announcements. One is this past Friday, I want to give a shout out to Lori Banzak and our technology integration crew who helped host the 10th annual Google conference, which is a statewide conference that goes from school district to host school district, and we had an opportunity to host over 650 participants on Friday within our school at Clarkston High School. I took part in it as a conference goer and as superintendent. I was extremely impressed by all of the different elements of technology coming together and the way that our staff, all our teachers, could interact with teachers across the state of Michigan here in Clarkston. So I appreciate our families who helped us out by having their kids home that day, but we made a very good use of that time. Finally, I want to salute out to Ms. Mary Beth Rogers here, part of our central office staff, who's our Executive Director of Business Services, who came through with a very solid audit that we heard earlier in our community audit presentation, and I want to tell her thank you on behalf of the school district, and great job. Thank you, Mr. Need.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. We have one presentation item tonight, a Hawaii trip presentation. Dr. Ryan.
Thank you. Okay, we have Miss Laura Murray and a couple of her students that are going to give us some presentation on the trip. Thank you.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you for letting us present tonight and for approving us to go on this amazing trip. So I have a couple of students here that are going to talk a little bit about our trip, and you can see some of the amazing pictures as they discuss. So Mitchell's going to start us off.
Hi, this is Hawaiian presentation. You see here we were given some food from a lady that taught us how to like plant trees and stuff. What the heck?
Got it.
I'll do it from over here. Maybe
Oh,
it's
thank you.
It's okay. Great.
So this is Hawaiian dance. So it's called I don't even know how to pronounce it, but anyways, so they danced in front of us. It was like a dance. Yeah, and from different islands and stuff. Next one, please. This is what we ate there. We got to eat a lot of different stuff. If you see, like, we went to a market and we got to try a lot of different foods, like pears and like, I forget one, was it a dragon fruit? It might have been. And we got to like grill our own food one time. It was pretty good. I really liked it. Next one, please.
So we went. Okay. So we went to the Cloud Forest Sanctuary, which I think 50 or so years ago it was just nothing but like a barren wasteland. Not really though. But it's been growing there, and it's this guy who was really nice and cool stuff. He dedicated his life to making this forest, and I thought it was really cool. Next slide, please. Can you do the next slide, please? So we went to Black Sand Beach. It's nothing like I've ever seen before. I've seen white sand, but I thought it was really cool. It was also really hot to like step on, and it hurt. But it was really cool, and we saw some sea turtles there too. And I've never seen a turtle before, so I thought that was really neat.
So that was Jacob. We also, being a former history teacher, well, I'm still a history teacher, but taught a lot about World War II. We had the opportunity to go on to the USS Missouri and to see Pearl Harbor, the memorial. So we were actually on two islands. So the previous pictures were from the Big Island of Hawaii, and this is from Oahu. Next. I did have a couple quotes from other students that couldn't make it tonight. Zane had said about the Diamond Head Trail. It was one of my favorite. Not only did we get exercise and have the ability to say that we hiked it, I got to be hundreds of feet up in the air, got to see the city's ocean and the cool breeze, and it was really quite a hike. We had lots of water. And Mitchell was like getting to go on the USS Missouri. It was a giant warship. I had asked him what was one of their favorite things they got to do. So we got to go all through the ship, and it was used all the way up through the Persian Gulf War. And now it's a museum. And Nathan had said this is the boat ride we took where we had a water slide and we actually did snorkeling. And you can see it was a little cloudy that day, but they really enjoyed, saw lots of the fish, and they liked the water slide, and that was fun. Next. Just some other pictures from the active volcano that we got to see from afar, to the waterfalls, to the sunsets, and flying in, you know, and the trees. Just the pictures really, I think, tell the story of the amazing beauty and power of the islands. And I think that was the last one. So yeah, we had 9 students go and 3 adults other than myself. And I think everyone would say that we had a really great time. So we're hoping to, I'd like to do another trip sometime. So thank you again for listening and for letting us do this great experience.
Well, that is awesome. Anybody have any questions or about the trip or comments?
Makes me want to go to Hawaii.
Yeah.
That's nice.
I'm jealous. I have to say that. So thank you very much for coming and sharing the slides and sharing your recap of the trip. We really appreciate it. Mitchell and Jacob, if you could come up here for a second. Since you guys did such a great job presenting, we have just a little token for you. All right, thank you very much. You are very welcome.
Nice job.
I always tell people at that age, if I were asked to come up before a school board, I would be absolutely tongue-tied and unable to do anything. So I'm always really impressed when we have our kids come up and actually give us their thoughts and their presentation. So thank you again. Moving to action items, item 6.1 is approval of personnel changes. May I have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education approves the personnel changes as listed on the attached sheets.
Support.
Motion made and supported. Any comments or questions for Mr. Lucido? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Item 6.2, approval of boys volleyball and club sport at Clarkston High School. May I have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education approves the addition of boys volleyball as a club sport at Clarkston High School.
Support.
Motion made and supported. We had a presentation on this item at last month's board meeting. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item 6.3, approval of the storage area network upgrade and implementation services. May I have a motion, please?
I move the Board of Education approves the SAN upgrade and implementation services in the amount of $65,189 to People Driven Technology with a 5% contingency for a total of $68,448.45 as presented.
Now, Mrs. Harrison is here. Dr. Ryan, do you have any comments on this item? Or?
As I'm sure you guys from the update and in the packet, I think this is a great investment where we were kind of doing a little bit of a cost avoidance and getting a new sand system. It seemed as when I discussed it from the feedback from the board, it seemed like a no-brainer in terms of us upgrading and keep our systems at a high level and not paying the maintenance costs, which we can roll into a new system. So I think we're good to go.
I would like to support the motion.
Motion made and supported. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mrs. Harrison, for all that information. It was very well put together and very easy to understand, so thank you. Item 6.4, approval of the Clarkston High School security doors. May I have a motion, please?
I move the Board of Education approves the contract for the main entrance doors at Clarkston High School to Glassco Corporation in the amount of $75,298 with a contingency and allowance for demolition and access control in the amount of $32,530 for a total recommendation of $107,828 as presented.
Support.
Motion made and supported. Do you have any comments, Dr. Ryan?
No, I think that's pretty well spelled out, the next two.
Yep. Any comments or questions on item 6.4?
Just if you, Dr. Ryan, if you would just reiterate what was in the information about the source of the funds for these doors.
I'll have either Mary Beth, you would like to field that, give the specific detail.
Last year, we were given the 97C security grant, so this will be coming out of the carryover from that because we had 2 years to spend it.
Thanks for clarifying.
No problem.
Which, I don't know if you know, but that is state funding. It was a categorical in our state aid.
Perfect.
Seeing no other comments, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Item 6.5 is the approval of window safety film. May I have a motion, please?
I move the Board of Education authorize the administration to execute a contract to Buster's Blinds Incorporated in the amount not to exceed $245,000 for the purchase and installation of window safety film as presented.
Support.
Motion made and supported. Any questions or comments?
I have a question.
Mrs. Cybers?
The bid that was given or requested, how many windows are covered? Is it for external windows only, internal windows?
External windows for now.
Okay.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
it's external for windows for all of the schools, correct?
Minus. Do we include, except for the board office, right? The early childhood portion is covered, but not this building right here.
Okay. Is there a plan to include interior windows at any point? Is that a part of discussions or?
It's something we're discussing. We have most of our, as Mary Beth pointed out, all that safety grant money, we have almost every penny spent. So we're doing that. We're looking at, we're getting quotes right now on shades internally.
The nightlock shades?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lucio.
Thank you, Mrs. Lucido. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item 6.6 is the approval of HVAC and hardware improvements. May I have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education approve the construction contracts for the district-wide HVAC and hardware improvements in the amount of $13,715,106, with a contingency set aside in the amount of $1,371,511, for a total recommendation of $15,086,617.
Support.
Motion made and supported. Any comments or questions?
I'd just like to add, this
Mr.
is part of our bond project that we want to do air conditioning everywhere we possibly could in the district, and this is a big chunk of that we have going forward. So this is exciting. While there's a lot of jargon and boring things like electrical in here, the ultimate aspect of this is air conditioning in our classrooms throughout the school.
And I also have, just for the board to know, that I have Sean from AUK here with his team to be able to answer any of the technical questions as well, if anybody had anything to follow up, so that if there's anything else.
Excellent. Mrs. Cybers.
As the liaison to Bailey Lake Elementary, I just wanted to extend a Bailey Lake thank you for the air conditioning that will be coming. It is hot.
Register that, Mr. Linden.
And can you just explain the contingency? Is it based on a percentage or?
Yeah, I think I can field that one, and Mr. Linden. All projects have, based on their category, recommended contingency to cover any unanticipated parts of the construction, installation, or purchasing, and it's within an industry standard
10%.
of 10%.
Yeah, with these air handling units, when we rip them out and we want to fit new ones in, I'm sure that every spot and every hole and every electrical access is going to be exactly the same in every single one that
Sure.
we do. So just in case it might not be, we have a contingency if we pull something out and there's a block that's broken, we've got to do some reinforcement or some things that we didn't anticipate.
So we can assure our students and staff at Bailey Lake we will not be using fans as a contingency if it doesn't work for air conditioning. Correct, Mr. Linden?
Also, as a room mom, I really appreciate that.
Very good. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And then is it going to affect, I mean, it's coming out of the bond money. Is that going to affect, like, we're going to be short a certain amount for
Nope.
upcoming projects or anything?
No, when they do the pricing and we do the different projects, including the junior high and the mammoth scale, it is done with like a 10% contingency, and anything that's done that where we're trying to fit the whole budget together, we'll go under what we need to make sure that we maintain that 10% contingency. And then at the conclusion of all the projects, we consolidate the remainder, hopefully positive, those contingencies to examine other projects that are listed on the approved bond list, or projects that are scaled, we can scale up based on available revenue.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan.
Just a real quick question. When
Mrs.
are we
Egan.
going to start tearing up the ductwork? The timing?
Mr. Verlin, when are we going to start tearing up the ductwork?
Okay. Okay, all right.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? I think virtually everything in our bond program is needed and worthwhile. I'm not sure that there's anything that got more universal acceptance than having this
Yeah.
HVAC in the elementary schools. So we thank the voters again for their support of the bond.
Agreed.
Hearing no further comment or questions, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item 6.7 is the acceptance of the audit. May I have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education approves the audit for June 30th, 2023 as presented.
Support.
Motion made and supported. Mrs. Rogers?
I would like to introduce Mark Sawyer, who was the lead auditor on our audit this year, and he's just going to do a real high level, point out a few of the very important points to make in the audit and how the year went for us.
Great. Welcome, Mr. Sawyer, again.
Thank you. So we do have the presentation on the screen, but I think I'll probably skip and just recap again for you, because a lot of you were in the room. You probably don't want to hear it twice. I know it's not the most exciting news. Hawaii trips are much more fun. Mary Beth was fantastic to work with again. We love working with the district. We had a nice, clean, smooth audit process. Unmodified opinions in our report. The unmodified opinion is the highest opinion that we can give in an audit report. It's all that MDE accepts for when we submit these audits, so there's no impact on state aid or anything of that nature. So we thought it was a good year. We've been working with the district for quite a while now. I don't know if it's upwards of 10 years or so, and really have streamlined that process, which can be challenging. We know how much work it is, Mary Beth and her team, to work with us on that, so we appreciate it. The financial audit, unmodified opinions. We also do a single audit, that's the federal compliance audit. Because you have federal grants exceeding $750,000 by a lot, you're upwards of $11.5 million this year in federal grant expenditures. That is the driver of the report. That's what requires it. It's a risk-based audit, and we had no issues in that report either with our compliance testing that we performed. And the programs we looked at are the special education cluster, so your IDEA program, and also the Education Stabilization Fund, which I call ESF, but that never really took off. So your ESSER 1, 2, 3, GEAR, all of those emergency COVID-related funding, CARES Act, ARP, those are all bundled into one program. So we've audited that really the last few years here, and that's coming to an end. I hope maybe next year we won't have to audit that for the first time in a while. But no issues in either report, and again, we appreciate the opportunity to work with the district. Any questions beyond that?
Any questions for Mr. Sawyer? We did have a public hearing at 6:30 where Mr. Sawyer went through the audit in some more detail, but if anyone has any additional questions? Okay, I would just say this is the 9th audit, the presentation that I've sat through. Every year we get the highest unmodified opinion, and that's a real credit to Mrs. Rogers and the business office. So echoing Dr. Ryan's comments from a moment ago, thank you very much for all your hard work and your team.
Thank you.
Hearing no comments, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. That concludes our action items. Item 7.1 is our monthly financial update. And again, our Executive Director of Business Services, Mrs. Rogers.
Our financial update is going to be through October 31st. So you'll be getting September and October data. At this point, your budget to actual revenues are around 18%, with the highest would be your local revenue due to the some of your property tax collection. You won't see the other revenue pieces real high because we don't start getting state and typically federal revenue until October 20th. It's the first time we get anything from the state or the federal government. So your budget to actual expenditures are 22%, with your instructional at 22% and your operations at just under 30% spent so far, budget to actual. Your October 31st, 2023 fund equity right now is at 18.64 million. You have your 3-year graph that shows you, and it's trending just like the other years. And then your June 30th, 2023 audit, which you just received, is at 25.185 million. And you were given the September and October data with all the check registers. Do I have any questions about any of this? Any clarification that might need to be done for the 2 new board members?
Any questions for Mrs. Rogers? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We have no discussion items this evening. Item 9 is the second opportunity for citizen comments for any topic, whether or not on the agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address the board? Mrs. Allen is shaking her head no, so we will move forward. Information items. Our next Board of Education meeting is Monday, December 4th for our board self-evaluation workshop, tentatively set for 7 p.m., subject to change. Then our regular meeting is next Monday, December 11th, 2023 at 7 p.m. here in the board office. At this point, we are going to recess into the board conference room. We are going to have a workshop on secondary instructional initiatives with Mrs. Mahoney, Laura Marler, and Sean Wood. Anyone is welcome to attend. It is still open to the public, and there will be no business. However, after the workshop, we will have a closed session, and then we will adjourn. So at this point, we will recess, take perhaps a 5-minute break, and go to the conference room for our workshop.